the movie. Roderick is like, I like to fly under the radar, set the bar as low as possible. So all you do is exceed expectations. That is what Ryan Tannehill did today. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, September the 11th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined as always by producer JT, who you can follow at JT_Runke on social media. JT, how are you? First NFL Sunday of the year in the books. Week 1, as weird as ever. How are you doing? How was your day?
You know, NFL football is back when Puka Nacua is tied with Tyreek Hill for the most receptions in week 1 with most targets in week 1 with
15 targets for Big Puka.
We're so back, baby.
We're so back. No, my we're back moment today was after the first quarter of every game, every fan coming to these drastic conclusions, which is going to be a large key to today's topic. But like, already deeming teams and players good and bad after 15 minutes of the first game of the whole season. Like, we're back. I love it.
I do hope
for the world
that Stoney Keeley poured himself a nice big glass of bourbon tonight to celebrate his Puka Nacua victory. That he is now basically.
Are you saying you hope he did that, or he did that?
No, I hope he does.
No, I hope he's celebrating the victory as well. Yeah, no, 100%. Welcome into the show, everybody. We're talking Titans, reacting to the Titans' loss in week 1 in New Orleans to the Saints. A lot to get into. But before we do, we have to recognize our fantastic sponsor here at the Hot Read Podcast, BoomBozz Pizza and Tap House. Guys, they have some of the best, most award-winning craft and artisan pizzas in the world, according to the Vegas International Expo of Pizza and the International Pizza Championships. They have won Best Pizza in the world twice at the International Pizza Championships, which, I mean, that sounds pretty official to me. And based on tasting the food there, I can tell you it checks out. Like the math, I run the numbers. It works. It's delicious. Yeah, it's fantastic. And they are in Middle Tennessee, in Spring Hill, in East Nashville, in Murfreesboro, also Kentucky and Indiana, some locations up there. So check out BoomBozz Pizza. We love those guys, and we love doing our shows with them every Thursday live in Spring Hill. But today we are live on a Sunday night. We have just watched the I don't know if you can really call it a game between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. There was football activities going on in MetLife Stadium this evening. And Daniel Jones, aside from getting killed all night long, was also aggressively bad all night long. And the Cowboys were aggressively amazing all night long. And it's just one of those games where every single year, JT, the NFL thrusts NFC East divisional matchups into our face in prime time. And they know they're going to be duds because somehow, for some reason, the Cowboys insist on absolutely murdering NFC East teams in explicit, not safe for work, not safe for television fashion on national primetime games. And then they also then go to the playoffs and lose in the most hilarious and like emasculating and disappointing way possible. And so this cycle of like Cowboys amazing because they kill NFC East teams on live television all year long, and the games suck, and when nobody watches them past halftime, but they must be good. Then they get killed in the playoffs, and then we get to the offseason, and the NFL is like, you know what we want? More of that. Couldn't explain it to you, but that's what our Sunday night was, and so we're recording here, and we're getting to all of our podcast responsibilities, getting to a little bit early because, frankly, who needs to tune into that madness that's going on in MetLife? We've got winners and losers today, as we will every single Monday. Every single day on the show following the Titans game. I forget, sometimes they're not on Sundays, but most Mondays and the occasional Friday show. I guess the London game will also be on a Monday, Sunday evening. But so before we get into some winners and losers from today's losing effort by the Titans, just wanted to kind of recap, a very ugly way to start the season for the Titans, JT. Not ugly in the sense that the score was ugly. Like, they lost by 1, certainly not an embarrassment by any stretch of the imagination, but the nature of the loss was the ugly part, right? 5 field goals, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, each progressively worse than the last, big play miscues and untimely penalties. Like, that's what defined this game for the Titans. And then now you've got the varying levels of panic setting in across the NFL. So we're here to remind you on today's show and through today's winners and losers that the annual reminder, week 1 in the NFL is a liar. You really should not believe anything that you saw today until you see more. Now is not the time for concern, or excuse me, now is the time for concern. It's not the time for conclusions. That's going to be really the theme of today's episode. Now is the time for concern. Concern is fair. Concern is warranted. I guess you could say concern and optimism, both sides of the spectrum. But conclusions are not really fair through week 1. For reference, last year we saw the 49ers lose to the Bears, the Jaguars lost to the Commanders, and the Cowboys lost to the Bucks all in week 1. It's historically notorious week 1 in the NFL for weird and wacky outcomes. And Lord knows we saw plenty of that today. The Bengals died. The Chiefs on Thursday night died. The Steelers got murdered by the 49ers, a team that a lot of people thought would be good. Am I missing any other insane outcomes today? Like that kind of.
The only one that truly felt right was an absolute shootout between the Chargers and Dolphins, but every other game was like
proper. Yeah.
Like, I mean,
how about the Bucks beating the Vikings? Hello,
Buccaneers. Lamar looking really bad against the Houston Texans team. Like,
yes,
like a lot of just weird games, except an absolute shootout. But
yeah, weird stuff happens, except for that game that just felt right between those two teams. And yeah, like it was a fast track out there in LA. You knew it was going to be one of those games. And kind of like, I don't know if I went from watching the Titans game to watching that game pretty much. And it felt like watching two different sports. Like it didn't, it's not really even similar in any way, shape or form. No, it may be more like college football than anything watching that game. Just no defense. We're just going to score and be amazing. And Tyreek Hill is going to catch 1,000 balls for 10,000 yards. But yeah, week 1, historically notorious for weird and wacky outcomes. So if you have a particularly strong or definitive take after week 1, you're almost certainly doing it wrong. So that's something that we're going to keep in mind today. So let's dive into some of those concerns and some optimism from today's game for the Titans. With that knowledge in mind, here are your winners and losers from week 1.
Yeah, let's start off with the first loser today, and it's got to be the guy who had the roughest day out there in week 1, Ryan Tannehill.
JT, let's enter the spin zone here. Ryan Tannehill realized, and this is 4D chess on his part, he realized that having your nightmare game in the last game of the season is far worse than having your nightmare game in the first game of the season. So he decided to flip them. Just get it out of the way. He's playing chess, not checkers, boys and girls. Like it's all uphill from here. What was in Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the movie, Roderick is like, I like to fly under the radar, set the bar as low as possible. So all you do is exceed expectations. That is what Ryan Tannehill did today. He set the bar impossibly low. So I guess the good news there is, and maybe this is a knock on wood moment, because maybe I suppose it could get worse. Maybe you throw 4 interceptions. I really don't see it getting worse than this all year long for him. So that's a good thing, I suppose. But in seriousness, this appeared to be, to the naked eye, the worst Ryan Tannehill performance of his career. Certainly the worst of his Titans career. And the numbers kind of back that up. Let's start with a clip from head coach Mike Vrabel talking about Ryan Tannehill's performance today and making sure to point out that it's not all on his quarterback.
Play and the line play and the defensive play, everybody. It's just, it's never going to be about one guy. I told him at halftime, we got to block better, we got to get into routes better, we got to get open quicker, and we have to throw the ball better, and the runners have to run better. So I think that's what it's always going to be. Everybody's tied in. That's where we're at. Week 1, found some adversity. It's a great challenge on the road. When we handled the environment, we were able to hit some plays. Unfortunately, got behind the sticks. Too many long yardage situations, too many 3rd and longs, which led to too many 3rd and longs, which led to not enough conversion.
It's never not funny how jovial and mood, how like maybe jovial is strong, but like just generally a chill and good mood Mike Vrabel is in whenever they lose. His press conferences, like in the media pool, it's well known amongst us that like if you're going into a press conference after a win, get ready for kind of prickly Mike Vrabel. And if you're going in after a loss, odds are he'll like be in a pretty relaxed mood. And so like if the Chargers win in Nissan Stadium next week, he will seem 10 times more depressed than he is in that video. For what reason, I could not tell you, but that's just the way that he is. This was Ryan Tannehill's first 3 interception game, JT, since a particular game of note a couple of seasons ago against one Cincinnati Bengals team in the divisional round of the playoffs. That game that everybody is aware of, this was his first 3 interception outing since then. Statistically, this game was actually a good deal worse for him than that. If you look at the numbers, if you go by passer rating, it was his worst game of his entire career. He had a 28.8 rating, quarterback rating, that is, in the 16-15 loss at New Orleans. And in the 41-7 loss at Buffalo last year in week 2, that grade for reference had a 32.7. And that Bengals playoff game, he actually had a 66.7 grade overall, significantly better. So today's grade of 28.8, the worst of his entire long NFL career. Kind of impressive a feat. Like I saw at one point in fantasy, he had negative 1.5 points or something. I think he finished the day on most platforms at like 1.5 points, even a really solid showing from him. This next clip is Ryan Tannehill after the game talking about his comfort level, saying that things just didn't go his way, but he did feel comfortable in the system and he didn't want to get into any of the details on the interceptions.
Healthy, felt really good mentally, ready to roll. Just didn't come out and play well. Obviously, I'm not happy with the way it performed, and there's a lot of room to grow there, and excited to get back to work and be ready to go next week.
A couple of those throws to Hopkins, they ended up getting intercepted. Was it a matter of like not being able to step into the throw, or what happened there?
I'm not going to get into to all the interceptions and what caused them all, but at the end of the day, you got to clean them up and eliminate them.
If you look at his EPA, which is expected points added, it was among the lowest EPA per dropback numbers from the early slate per True Media. Ryan Tannehill with a negative 0.47 EPA. Kenny Pickett, who also had a horrible day, with a negative 0.49. And then Joe Burrow bringing up the rear, negative 0.65. Tough scene for those 3 fellas. The most obvious issue with his play was, I think, just the clear inability, JT, to dial in how much juice to put on his deeper passes. He went 1 for 8 on throws of 15 or more air yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on those passes. All 3 of his interceptions were pretty dramatic underthrows. Again, each kind of getting worse than the next. And so you had the first interception was DeAndre Hopkins picked off. And then to Chris Moore on that really deep shot right after halftime on that first drive. It gets batted down by the deeper cornerback and picked off by the shallower DB, which there was some gentle interference on that we'll talk about later. And then another Hopkins pass where Marshawn Lattimore picks him off again. This next clip is another Ryan Tannehill statement from after the game, talking about how he's looking forward to assessing the damage here, but then is ready to move on to the Chargers in week 2.
All around, there's certain areas where, the throw, I had a couple open guys and missed them, right? And that's something obviously I want to get cleaned up, and then just being in tune with everything, that's going on and what we're trying to do offensively, being on the same page with the receivers is crucial, and excited that, it's just week 1, and we have a lot of time to get this thing cleaned up and ready to roll for week 2.
He seemed to try to adjust after that, but then promptly overthrew Chigakonkwo on that trick play where Chig managed to get wide open running up that right-hand side of the right-hand sideline, that is. And it was a really nice, well-drawn trick play. I actually recall seeing that earlier in camp and wondering, like, I wonder if they're going to bring that out anytime soon. Didn't expect it in the first week. They dialed it up. It worked perfectly, except the quarterback just way overthrew Chig. It was a certain 7 points there. And then later in the game, I think on the last drive of the game, Ryan Tannehill had Tyjae Spears coming out of the backfield on the left-hand sideline, threw the ball too far to the sideline, to the boundary side of Tyjae Spears, forces him to contort his body, ends up not bringing in the catch inbounds. If he throws that ball with better placement away from the boundary, leads Tajay up the sideline. That's almost certainly 7 points as well. So just a really difficult to watch day for him in terms of kind of dialing in his distance. Like, it kind of seemed that simple, JT. Did it not seem like a guy that just, I don't know, like a pitcher that just cannot stop throwing high or low to save his life? That's kind of how it felt to me.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't like there was any, I think, any glaring issues. It's just he put a little too much on a lot of kind of plays where it would have been a touchdown if he just would have kind of sat back and just given it the normal throw that he usually does. But that's just kind of how it goes in these first games, kind of taking the rust off of it, because he didn't throw a pass all preseason in real live action. So, I mean, getting out there, probably are going to throw a little bit more on there than you'd like. So it's understandable, but also super frustrating still. Do
you think that has anything to do with it? Like, I'm glad you brought it up, and we're going to ask him this week. I'm going to try to ask more than just the cookie cutter. And I'm going to ask a lot of these guys the more than just the cookie cutter question of, do you think not playing in the preseason, impact? Because obviously they're going to be like, no, no excuses. We have expectations of ourselves. We're professionals. We've been in this league for a long time, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, 3 years in a row now, the Titans have, and you could argue 4 all the way back to when the Titans did win on Monday night against the Broncos in Denver. Even in that game, I think they won 17-16, but you have that game, and then you have the blowout to Arizona in 2021. And then last year you have the last minute loss to the Giants with the Fat Randy missed kick. And now today you have really 4 games in a row, 4 years in a row now, where the Titans have had the same tack from a preseason perspective of, we're not going to really get our guys out there to get warm. Our starters, we'll get them a little bit of play here and there, maybe a specific unit that needs it, especially a specific younger group. But other than that, we're going to just start week 1. And they've looked like a team that hasn't really gotten warm yet. They look like a team that's really rusty and has not worked out the kinks of gelling yet. So I think it's not unfair to question. Yeah, y'all say it doesn't really matter, but does it? I don't know. I really don't know the answer.
And I think I don't think we'll ever get a clear answer. For reference, like Kenny Pickett in that first team squad on 5 drives that they played in the preseason had 5 touchdowns. And then in their first 5 drives couldn't get a first down today. So like,
the Giants looked awesome in the preseason. And then today they looked like that.
I think it truly is just like, either way, it is just a totally different mindset from the preseason of playing real football with guys who are also probably not playing in the preseason on the other end of the ball on the defense, like Marshawn Lattimore and all these guys who are going to be coming out there to get you and are not holding back like they have for the past month and a half. So I think there is an aspect to it, of course, but how much of it, it's really hard to say.
Well, I also wonder if the complexity of what you're running has anything to do with it, because like you mentioned, teams such as the Giants, such as the Steelers that did get some action in the preseason, but even then, all preseason plays on both sides of the ball are like cookie cutter, vanilla football 101 coverages. We're going to run a base cover 2. We're going to run a basic blitz. We're going to, it's very simple. We're going to run a 32 dash right up it's stuff from Pee Wee football. And then you go to what you're actually installing for your playbook, your plays that you've been cooking up all summer long that are top secret that you're trying to use to excel. And maybe that backfires a little bit at first because of the complexity, or maybe just because it's something you haven't had any opportunity to run live against anyone but your own team that, gets accustomed to those plays, starts to learn those plays. I wonder if that has something to do with it. Certainly something that I'm going to ask some questions about this week. One more clip here from Daniel Brunskill, Titans right guard. He had some thoughts after the game on the false starts in the game, which were a problem for the offensive line, the crowd noise, and Ryan Tannehill.
I know it's really hard for those guys, especially the farther out you get.
Yeah.
It's so hard to hear, and like guys are revved up for the game. They're trying to, it was early on kind of where this would happen a little bit, and guys are trying to get going. I know there's one where we're getting late down in the play clock, and Ryan's clapping, and I got to do a better job because I'm looking back to just start yelling, because we were on a different cadence where we go multiple times, and I just got to yell out to the guys and just tell them, hey, it's off, we got to go. So it's just kind of communication with everybody. and then just kind of getting in. And that's one of the hardest environments you're going to be in. I mean,
that's what I was
there's
gonna
Kansas
ask,
City, there's Seattle. Here's one of those places, but I mean, there's not a lot of places that are like this. And for the first game, I mean, that was a huge test, and we knew the whole time that was going to be the biggest, I think, issue. And going into it, and I think we can definitely do better. And all it's going to do is just help us get going forward. Because getting that one out of the way now, knowing what it's going to be like when we go forward and we get into a game where maybe we didn't think it was going to be able to go out, we're prepared for it. And so I think we just need to go home, clean it up, and get ready for the next game.
How was Ryan? I mean, this was a lot of adversity. 3 interceptions, under a lot of pressure. How was he throughout the whole process?
You know what, Ryan's just slinging that rock. I told him after, I was like, keep slinging it. I think a lot of that, some of those were on us. I mean, some of those were in his face when he's trying to make that throw. That is not easy if you can't step into a throw and you're trying to beam it on the sideline, So, I think it's just kind of an all-around effort. Credit to the Saints. I mean, they're a hell of a team with a hell of a defensive coordinator, hell of good players, like 56, 94. I mean, they got the young kid, 90, and he played a hell of a game. You got to give credit to those guys as well. They did a great job dialing up some really tough games. Their linebackers do a really good job of creating space, making it really hard to pick up those games. And I think that they're one of the best teams at that. And going forward, there's already a couple teams I can think of that have that same type where they really practice those games. And we're going to have to figure out what do we need to do, especially with those teams that create that much space. Because there's some times where you can be as perfect as possible, and they'll still get you. So if you're just like a split second off, so you got to give credit to those guys, but at the same time.
And shout out our guys TD and PK for those clips. But JT, here's the reason why our concern over conclusions motto must come into play here. Here's the parsing for week 1. This was Ryan Tannehill's first game of the season in a new offense with a new offensive coordinator and a bunch of new offensive weapons. With any team installing a new offense or dealing with, undergoing a massive personnel overhaul, which the Titans are doing both of, I think that there's a period of growing pains that should be expected. We've seen this before. We're going to see it again. It's the way that this works. You don't suddenly do a brand new thing or, operate with brand new people perfectly on day one. So the Titans are managing both of those things. It often doesn't matter how good your pieces are on a team. Time to gel is a mandatory ingredient for success. So my ultimate analysis on Ryan Tannehill before we move on, he looked uncomfortable out there to me. It went beyond the pass rush that he was facing. I felt that he just uncomfortable with the situation, what he was seeing out there. Maybe it was the receivers not getting open as well or as often as they should have, but I'm inclined to think he maybe just wasn't seeing the field as well as he'd like. In addition to making a handful of pretty poor throws, he was missing reads badly, new plays with routes and combinations that he's not familiar with yet. All of that has to be second nature to a quarterback. The scheme needs to be second nature. It's like if you ever tried to learn a foreign language, it's you're learning it, you're thinking about it actively in your brain. And anybody that has become fluent in another language can tell you there becomes a moment where suddenly you no longer thinking about it. It's the way that your body works. You start to think in Spanish. You start to dream in Spanish. You'll hear interpreters tell you about this. That's how it needs to be for these players. And when you're in a system for a long time, it's second nature. You hear the play call, you see it in your head, you feel it in your body. You've done it a billion times. The Titans aren't in that place. Ryan Tannehill is not in that place. So is that to make an excuse for him? No, but is it a reason? Probably. I think it's a reasonable thing to point out. And so perhaps it just isn't the case for him yet that he feels that way with much of this scheme. But I'll say to not be too soft on him, if that is the case, which is reasonable and understandable, you better adjust pretty quickly. You better do that soon, because the first 6 games of this season for the Titans, as we've established, easily the hardest 6-game stretch for them in terms of the quality of opponent.
Yeah, let's move on to a winner of this game, and it's the guy who scored all the points today, Nick
All
Folk,
the points.
who went perfect today for scoring 5 field goals, 5 for 5. He is one of our winners today.
Yeah, he literally did all of the scoring, all 15 of the Titans' points came off of the boot of Nick Folk, and he deserves the praise. Like what you saw today, that is why you give up the draft pick for him. That is why you make that trade. The Titans have to, at the very least, feel good about their kicking situation after this week because he was put through the whole gamut in a game that saw 8 total field goals made. Folk nailed 5 of them from 50, 27, 31, 45, and 29. That sounds like a practice, like a training camp report of where they put you through the gamut. Like that's what they do a lot in August, where it's like, let's line up from this distance and then move back here and move back up here. Let's get all the scenarios. He got all of them. 50, 27, 31, 45, 29. He hit from every distance, every length. Never really in doubt. All of those kicks were pretty good. There were an astonishing 293 yards of total kicks made in New Orleans, JT. I took the liberty of doing some math on that. Nick Folk had 182 of them, which is a lot of yards worth of kicks. So the Titans offense couldn't pull their weight on the scoreboard, but Folk did more than his fair share. One tangential element of his game, however, that bears discussing, as we've talked about a little bit, Folk came into the Titans organization with a red flag on him that was, this guy can't really do kickoffs. Like we don't know if he can get the ball, like physically, we're not sure he's got the leg anymore to get it into the end zone for touchbacks, because a lot of his recent kickoff experience didn't get to the end zone. They were returned. And that kind of was the case today. JT, 5 kickoffs today, and all 5 of them, or excuse me, not all 5 of me, the first 3 of them. And then let's see, let me make sure I've got this right. Okay, so the first 3 were returned. The final 2, he did finally get into the end zone for touchbacks. So 3 of his 5 today were returned and did not get into the end zone. Ultimately, it didn't result in like any dramatic field position advantage for the Saints. It was all kind of that 20 to 30 yard line. I think one was returned to the 33 yard line was the best that they did. So while his reputation for being unable to always get the ball far enough downfield to create touchbacks, I think is earned and like validated. We did hear him talk about, I worked in the offseason, and I'm sure he did. I'm not trying to make fun of him, but as much work as you can do, you are aging. Like you've reached a point now where I think you just don't have the leg to do that anymore. But as long as the Titans special teams and Craig Ackerman, who had a day besides we're going to forget that blocked punt. Don't worry about that. But the rest of it, a good day for Craig Ackerman, I suppose, if he can claim the glories of Nick Folk and the coverage teams. Yeah, it was good for him. And I don't think the kickoff thing will be an issue as long as the kickoff coverage team can do their job.
Let's move on to another loser, and one that we don't usually put in this category a lot of times, but Mike Vrabel today is one of the losers of this game, and not for his whole performance today of his coaching, but definitely down the stretch of the fourth quarter.
Not a loser for the first play where he throws the challenge flag out of the gate. Not cold with that trigger finger on the challenge flag. Warmed up with that bad boy, ready to throw it. Threw it with grace, with poise. I liked his approach to that. But this is the most hotly contested subject from this game. I'm going to try to explain to you why there is a definitively correct side to this debate. So with 2:20 left on the clock in the fourth quarter, Mike Vrabel had a decision to make. Go for it on 4th and 6 from the New Orleans 11-yard line, attempting to score a touchdown and go up 3 points. Or kick the field goal, cut the lead to 1, 15-16 would be the score, which is what they ultimately did, and hope your defense can get you the ball back in time to march down and kick a game-winning field goal. He chose to rely on his defense, and I think he was very, very wrong to do so. Now, let's get the basic logic of what he was thinking out of the way, because on the surface, you kind of understand it, right? If you don't think about it for more than a moment, it makes some sense. This Titans team, which strangely, this is one of the things today that was maybe one of the bigger takeaways year-to-year comparison. The past couple of seasons in a row, the Titans have been phenomenal in their red zone efficiency, getting into the red zone and turning that into 7 points and not 3. Today, they were 0 of 2, 0 of 3, at least 0 of 2 off the top of my head. They could not score touchdowns when they got into the red area, which was strange and out of character for them. And because of that, Mike Vrabel saw 4th and 6 on the 11-yard line. Need to score here, either a touchdown or a field goal. It takes 2 very different approaches. Got to pick my path. He kind of thought this team, we've this will be our 5th field goal of the day. We've done a pretty decent job of getting our now reliable kicker into field goal range to kick field goals. We've not done an awesome job of getting into the end zone. In fact, we've been unable to do that all day long. So I'm going to opt to try to get into field goal range instead of trying to score a touchdown. That's the basic logic. It's very flawed logic. And here's why. Ultimately, the defense didn't get off the field and they lost the game. So he was obviously wrong in that respect, not to just say like he's wrong because in retrospect, he was wrong. Like that you could be wrong either way. The point here is that the process was wrong. It's bad process. His decision to forego that 4th down conversion attempt was as poor logically as it was analytically. Many folks who are stuck in the mud in the dark ages will scoff at what I'm about to tell you analytically you're supposed to do in this situation. But I implore, if that is you, I implore you to at least consider the sheer magnitude of this number. Okay. There are a handful of win percentage models out there, but I'll reference for today's purposes, one of the best out there, ESPN's model, one of the best in the business. They've got a fantastic data set, an analytics model on win percentage that has decades and decades of football history plugged into it for reference, and then probabilities, calculations on probability that allow them to make these advanced decisions quickly on what you should and shouldn't do and what the numbers tell you your odds are. Basically, an advanced football historically based odds maker. So this analytic model for win percentage showed that the decision by Mike Vrabel to kick the field goal here yielded a 10% drop off in their win percentage, a 10% decrease in win percentage between going for it and not going for it, kicking the field goal and trying to get the ball back. That went, I believe, going for it would have given them about a 33% chance to win the game. Kicking the field goal dropped their chances down to 23% and some change. Now, no analytics model is without its flaws, and a lot goes into these decisions. And I think it's fair to say that there are simply some variables that a computer cannot account for. But for reference, the trickier decisions that these models, typically this model in particular that I've been following for a long time, the tricky decisions this model judges are typically in the 0 to 5% range. Where, just like it's kind of a coin flip. Either decision you make, it's not really going to impact your chances. 5% chance change. You made a bad decision, but not a backbreaking decision. That's what almost all of these trickier decisions it's supposed to judge are. All other decisions, it doesn't really publicly judge on social media because the decision is typically obvious. The coach almost always goes with the correct decision. This was one of those instances where a coach made a really wildly bad decision, and it had to kind of be like, what are you doing? Whoa, this was a really poor decision. Mike Vrabel made that really poor decision. This was, for a choice to have a whopping 10% win percentage delta, it's reasonable, I think, even if you're skeptical of analytics, it's reasonable to assume that the correct decision, according to the computer in this instance, is objectively the correct decision. This simply was an analytically unforgivable error. But perhaps you are somebody who scoffs at the notion of analytics telling a football coach what they should do. Fine. Okay, that's whatever. We'll reason this out ourselves. Let's look at it logically. Let's talk it out. It makes no sense trusting the guy who threw 3 interceptions with the game in this situation. That's what I saw a lot of on social media. Why would you trust Ryan Tannehill right here? Threw 3 picks today. Why? It makes no sense to trust him with the game right here. My response to that is simply, your options were trusting him then, or maybe getting the chance to trust him in a couple of minutes. Not trusting him at all was not on the menu. Like, that wasn't an option. So I don't understand that line of reasoning. Another popular thing I've seen is that they should, just let the defense bail the offense out again. They've been doing it all game. Like, let's just let the defense. And I get that. Like, you've grown accustomed in the past year and change, 18 months actually, of Titans football to the defense being able to carry the water for the offense, to carry the offense on its back in dire situations. However, when you actually go back and look in this game, JT, the Titans defense hadn't forced a 3-and-out once in the second half to that point. They hadn't allowed a drive of less than 26 yards in the half. On 11 total Saints drives in that game, New Orleans only went 3-and-out twice, both instances early on in the game. But the strongest counterpoint is this, and I want your opinions on this decision after I lay this out. folks that are arguing Mike Vrabel made the right decision because of the Titans' offensive woes, which I think is the most popular thing out there. It's just like the offense has been bad, so let's lean on the defense. They're conveniently ignoring the fact that in the best case scenario that you ultimately didn't even get a chance to try to bear the fruit of, they were going to need to rely on that very same defense or offense rather to march down the field 40 to 50 yards into field goal range with roughly 100 seconds of game clock to play with. Did you have more faith in the defense getting the perfect stop and the offense doing all of that? When the alternative was converting a simple 4th and 6 and being first and goal? Like, I think that's insanity, JT. What did you think of the decision in the moment? And has your opinion changed since that moment? Because I've heard some people be like, I thought they did the right thing, and then I looked at it, and I think he made the poor decision.
I mean, the way the game was going, like, I think going for it made sense. Not to say that the 4th and 6 was simple. You still would have had to, but then again, you would have.
It's a low probability situation for sure.
It
like,
is.
I'm not saying it's like, well, all you had to do. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But then you kick off the ball, and you're basically
an even lower probability situation is my point. Right?
Yeah, you kick the field goal, and then you kick off the ball, and they're in basically the same territory where your defense has to stop them. However, this team all day long was making it into field goal range, regardless of the situation the defense was throwing at them. So finally getting the touchdown on the board for the Titans probably would have been the correct decision in my opinion. I thought that when they were down in the red zone,
the Saints were getting into field goal range consistently. Yes. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
So I don't think that making the field goal and getting that stop was really going to happen because of just towards the end of the game in the second half, how just electric and just kind of how good Chris Olave and Mike Thomas were playing, right? Just kind of dicing up that secondary.
Well. Yeah,
Rashid Shaheed as well on that last kind of drive to seal the game. Like, those guys were getting big chunk plays. And so if you were going to play that game and try to hold out, it's better to try to take as many points as possible.
No, I agree. I mean, we saw that pretty much all game, that classic Titans defensive approach of bend, don't break. Between the 20s, we're going to let you move the ball, but in the red zone, we're going to try to be stiffen it up a little bit, make it difficult for you guys to get 7, force you to have 3. They did that almost all day long. Here's one final way of thinking about it that I kind of parsed out. If you make the field goal, which they did, you have to get a stop, and you have to score another field goal after you go. It has to be, you score another field goal on a 40+ yard drive. That's what's required if you make the field goal. If you go for it but fail to convert, you must stop the Saints offense and then score a touchdown on a 40+ yard drive. If you go for it and manage to convert, however, you needed to score a touchdown, and then at the very least keep the Saints offense from going the length of the field and scoring another touchdown. So converting and scoring was the only scenario that resulted in you truly being in control. And the requirement for kicking the field goal, for going on it on 4th down, they were kind of, or going. So let me make that more clear. The requirements for kicking the field goal or going for it on 4th and failing were very similar tasks. Either way, whether you went for it and failed or you kicked the field goal, you needed about a 40+ yard drive from the offense. The only situation there that gives you the option, the possibility rather, of taking that driver's seat, taking the lead and taking over the game, is going for it. You at least have an opportunity there to get those 7 points. Whereas with kicking the ball, you don't. And so, like, the downside of kicking was a 40+ yard drive required of you. The downside of going for it and failing was also a 40+ yard drive required of you. Either way, I analytically, logically, it was incredibly foolish. I think that, simply put, Mike Vrabel played to lose. And when you play scared, that's playing to lose. He played scared kind of all day. In that moment in particular, he played scared, and so he lost. That's how it works.
Moving on to another winner is a whole position group who made a huge impact on today's game, and that has to go to the defensive line.
Yeah, I'm going to be a broken record on this all season long. You just know it, because the defensive line for the Titans is really fantastic. Perhaps the only thing you could say about this team that is reliably, obviously going to be really, really good each week is this defensive line. They wasted no time in creating havoc in the Superdome. The group came away with 4 sacks and 8 quarterback hits, and it was the usual suspects pulling their weight. The perpetually underrated Danico Autry managed 1.5 sacks, a tackle for loss, 4 QB hits, and 5 tackles. And then Jeffrey Simmons on the inside got himself 1 sack, 2 TFLs, a QB hit, and 5 total sacks as well. Newcomer Arden Key, however, stole the show. And I tweeted out, ask me how surprised I am that Arden Key was the first to tally a sack for the Titans this season. He was fantastic in stealing the show. If you paid attention to his training camp, you were not surprised by this. It became a running bit at one point after practices to get a total sacks report from Arden after each practice. And so by the end of the day, he'd managed 1.5 sacks, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defended, 2 QB hits, and 4 total tackles. The one nitpick for this group that I have, JT, and I don't know if you noticed this as well, they started off really strong. They did not take any time to get into the flow of things. In the first half, they were laying waste to the Saints offense with regularity. But then you come into the second half, and the Saints seem to find their level in keeping Derrick Carr clean for the most part. And as the pass rush grew quiet, the passing game for the Saints heated up, and that Titans secondary started to get torched. I mean, they needed to be stronger in the second half than they were. I think that their first half was great. They needed to continue that into the second.
Yeah, I would agree. Everything you said, I think Derek Carr was definitely in his debut a little bit shaken in that first half. A lot of things did not go right for them. Definitely having to make plays on the fly, which resulted in them having to punt the ball away and turn it over. But then once you saw in that second half, like on the first or second drive, when he started really having that connection with Michael Thomas, and Michael Thomas just kind of coming back into his own, when Chris Olave finally started getting into the game, that's when you saw Derek Carr have a lot more time to get through all of his progressions and find those guys.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, let's move on now to a loser and a winner in the secondary today. The loser has to be Kristian Fulton for today.
Yeah, Kristian Fulton, on the show last week on the take purge, I jokingly talked about the situation where, it's possible that after all of this progress and the reporting on Kristian Fulton throughout camp, his contract year, he's getting positive progress being made. It's awesome. He looks great. He's a stud. And then his contract season would ultimately just still be the same frustrating, underwhelming impact style of play that we've seen from him. Or style of, it's not even style of play. It's just like style of existence, the way that he's not been as impactful for this team because he's not on the field. Because with Kristian Fulton, it really is that simple. And I'm not trying to say that is certain to become the case. Again, this is not a conclusion I'm drawing from week 1. I'm not saying at all that's what Kristian Fulton's year is going to be. I am saying that he's not off to a great start. I'm afraid he's not off to a great start, JT. It's pretty cut and dry with him. Like if he's on the field, he's healthy, he's their best cornerback. He's Tennessee's best cornerback. There's not really any arguing that. He just cannot stay healthy. And in particular, he can't stop suffering these soft tissue injuries. It was just a few minutes into the second quarter today when he was tended to by training staff on the field, helped off and deemed questionable to return. The hamstring injury is just one of a couple of those soft tissue injuries that he's had pile up over his career now. The silver lining, I guess, is that he ultimately did return. That's the silver lining here, though it wasn't really a triumphant return on what appeared to be his first playback. I'm not positive this was the first playback, but I'm pretty sure, like the reports from the press box was that they think it was his first playback. If it wasn't his first play, it was one of his first plays back. At the end of the game, he's back in the lineup at that outside right cornerback position, and he gets just torched by Rashid Shaheed up the sideline. He said after the game that it wasn't he wasn't hampered. He wasn't slow because of the hamstring. He just clamped down on the sticks at the boundary, and he got burned by Rashid up the sideline, who made a really nice catch and was able to keep his feet in bounds. So, getting cooked on that critical first down conversion at the sideline ultimately is what allows them to ice the game. Not great. Not a great day for him overall. Bad day for his hamstrings. Bad day ultimately for his level of play. I mean, fine from him play-wise when he was out there, but he was out there much. And when he was, it wasn't up to his very high standards, I would say. So, it remains to be seen just how big a deal his hamstring injury will be going forward. But they sure could use him being healthy. And for his sake, he sure could use staying healthy. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year.
Moving on to the winner in the secondary, who made his presence known almost basically immediately
Pretty much
into the
immediately.
game,
Yeah.
Amani Hooker.
Yeah, man. It's odd to begin a winner with a bad news, but I feel like I have to here to parse the good things I'm about to say about Amani Hooker. And this is not his fault, but it's just the reality of the situation. He is in concussion protocol after taking a particularly hard hit in the second half. You probably noticed him not being out there much at the end of the game, or not out there at all, rather, because he was in concussion protocol. I think it was the late third quarter when he got hit, but I can't remember to be sure. Either way, you could really easily argue that his presence was being missed once he left the game, because before getting hurt, dude was making plays left and right. On the opening kickoff, he opened the season with a statement by making the solo tackle, punching the ball out of the returner's hand in the process, and then securing the ball before tumbling out of bounds. His heroics really, like, from the opening possession, it stole that opening possession for the Titans from the Saints, gave the Titans fantastic field position, which they ultimately squandered, but really set them up for success there. They get their lead at 3-0 with that first field goal attempt of 50 yards from Nick Folk from inside fantasy enemy territory. Freudian slip. My fantasy team was horrible today, and I can't quit thinking about it. So, then on the final lengthy drive after halftime, or before halftime, Titans defense on the field, Saints driving. Really, this was the first drive of the game where they kind of effortlessly moved against the Titans, and you're like, I think they're going all the way to the end zone. Like this, they're humming here. He stops them, all of their progress, all of their momentum, dead in its tracks, intercepts Derrick Carr on the Titans' 12-yard line. The Saints have been driving the length of the field. Hooker's ability to spy on that coverage and jump the pass saved the Titans from losing the lead heading into the break, so that was a big play as well. 2 massive takeaways from him today. Wasn't enough to win the game ultimately, but he is a phenomenal talent. When he's out there, it's a big deal. He's one of the X factors for the Titans defense. They desperately need him to stay healthy. Not just because of what he brings when he's healthy, but because, as we've talked about, the depth behind him. It's Kevin Byard. It's Elijah Molden in that third slot. It's Amani Hooker, and then we don't want to talk about it. So if he can stay healthy, that's great. If the severity of his concussion dictates him being out for a long time, you would think he's, with the way the concussion protocol has been working recently, you'd think that he's going to miss at least one game now, because they're very cautious about that thing and don't want guys rushing back. If he has to miss more than one game, that could prove really costly for the Titans.
Yeah, and speaking of how costly it was for the Titans, our next loser is the secondary group as a whole.
Yeah, and this is one that I included partially because I saw some people talking about how the secondary was great today, or the defense was great today. I would pump the brakes there, bro. Like the Titans secondary was among the easiest to pass against in the entire league ultimately in 2022. And although they made a bunch of personnel improvements over the offseason, they weren't able to reap the benefits in the Superdome today. In total, Tennessee's defense allowed 5 plays of 20-plus yards, all of which were through the air. That doesn't include, by the way, the 19-yard touchdown pass from Derrick Carr. The only time period, rather, that a team in this game found the end zone too often in this game. You were seeing DBs seemingly lost or easily shaken on their routes, and the communication just seemed poor. You especially in that first half, there were a number of times where you saw veterans like Kevin Byard seemingly making up for some of the errors of the younger guys around them, or the more green guys around them, filling gaps in the zone that weren't necessarily their responsibility, kind of leaking over into an area to try to help protect the field and defend every blade of grass. But, of the Saints' 351 total yards in this game, 305 of them were passing. So, Derrick Carr, 23 of 33, 9.2 yards per completion clip, really good game, I'd say. A big passing game like that is much easier in my mind to excuse against a great passer, but I don't know who is calling Derrick Carr a great passer. He's the definition of good in this league, especially not when he's on a brand new team with a brand new coordinator and a brand new offense in his first game. Like, Tennessee secondary has some serious cleaning up to do. I thought that today's game was some more of the same in terms of what we saw last year. And despite, I think, getting better truly with the people they have on the field and at their disposal, they didn't really show it today. They have some more gelling to do.
Yeah, and then another winner on the offensive side of the ball, who will probably be a household name on this winners and losers list, Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I put out a halftime winners and losers list, and a lot of people were in the comments like, "You forgot Derrick Henry," and I'm like, "It's a weekly assumption. Let's just assume he's penciled in the winner column unless I say otherwise." But yeah, I mean, you could argue that Derrick Henry was the only offensive player wearing blue on Sunday who had a really good game, rushing 15 times for 63 yards and a respectable 4.2 yards per carry. Henry seemed ahead of his typically sluggish September schedule, the start that he typically has on the ground, at least. I was impressed by that. As a receiving threat, he was even better. 2 receptions on 3 targets for 56 yards, a blistering 28 yards per reception. While he clearly was the elite variable on the offense for the Titans in this game, it begs the question, a reasonable question, to wonder why he only touched the ball 17 times in this game, JT. Like, after all, this is the bell cow we've grown accustomed to seeing get 20 to 30 touches each game. Whenever he has a sub 20 touch game, it's usually in a blowout one way or another with this team. But this was not one of those instances. So why? In this regard, I think you could actually spin Henry as a loser in today's show. Like, new Titans coordinator Tim Kelly, his offense raised plenty of questions this offseason about how different it might be, how, particularly if it would still feature Henry as its prized jewel, would it still revolve around Henry? The draft selection of Tyjae Spears further complicated that situation, causing some to question if Henry would be given less of a back-breakingly demanding role in the new Titans offense, what we've grown accustomed to seeing him do for this team. Now, perhaps the lack of Henry focus today was an effort to save his legs as much as possible early in the season. That's a possibility with this team. Maybe that's part of the reason Tyjae Spears is around, to give Henry a reprieve and save him for the end of the year when the games really, really matter. Or maybe Tim Kelly some people brought this up and I think it's fair. Maybe Tim Kelly just got a little bit, he heard those cries for creativity and took them to heart a little bit too much, right? He overdid it, accidentally neglected the old school Henry game. Do you think that has anything to do with it? Did you think, because I heard a lot of people say today, oh, it was a lot of the same with the Titans today. I don't know, man. You saw the defense was great. The kicking game was really good. That's new. The pass, the receivers had a pretty good game, I'd say. That's new. They were out there. That's new. Your quarterback just needs to not throw 3 interceptions, I'd say, is a good starting point. And then, you've got Tyjae Spears in there, and you've got a team offensively that maybe got a little bit too cute by half at times, but that's a good thing. You want to over adjust. You've been begging them to be creative, right? I felt like you saw that today.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think a lot of people's perception probably would have changed if, once again, Ryan Tannehill just doesn't absolutely sling the ball over Chikakonko and Tyjae Spears' heads. But you could kind of tell that, once Derrick Henry broke off that massive run, that's when the attention turns to Derrick Henry. And that's when you have to have that influx of creativity, because you know how much is going to be centered around him. And so there should be a point where Tim Kelly probably overdid it. I would agree with that sentiment a little bit, to where, at the end of the game there, in that last drive, you should be using Derrick Henry because of the explosive playmaking ability that he has.
No, I agree. Whatever the case was, what Kelly said earlier in the summer to us in the press corps really stuck with me watching this game. He said he'd be in, and Teron Davenport's the one that asked this question. He brought it up on Twitter, and it's what made me think of this the whole game, watching it from that point forward. He said he'd be foolish to get away from what the Titans do best when asked if he planned on still revolving the offense around Derrick Henry. And really, at no point today in New Orleans did his actions reflect that. So something to monitor going forward.
Yeah, and then finally, our last loser of the game, and probably the biggest one that most people had complaints about, is the officiating and the referees today.
Yeah, the eyesight of the referees is what I wrote down for the losers. I'm rarely a blame the refs guy. Nobody likes blame the refs guy. And that isn't the case today. The Titans have themselves to blame for this loss, for sure. However, the officiating was a massive problem in this game. That that two things can be true. The Titans have themselves to blame. The officiating is also, it bears some of the blame in this game. Like there's really no way around it. Head coach Ron Torbert and his crew were really aggressively bad today, dreadfully bad. They made several bad calls throughout the game, and on the whole, I think those calls certainly hurt the Titans the most. I don't think there's really any way to argue that. Ryan Tannehill's second interception came on a deep shot to wide receiver Chris Moore, who had been held and interfered with on the play, both holding and pass interference, both infractions, no flag called. On the Saints' first drive of the play, people kind of forgot this, I think, but their biggest pass and catch on that drive seemed clean, but then upon inspection of the replay, the receiver's second foot was clearly on the sideline and out of bounds. Like it was on the white. Should not have stood. Mike Vrabel ran down there and considered throwing the challenge flag. He did not. I thought he was wrong not to do so. I thought that he should have thrown that flag, and so another bad call. That's not to say that every one of these more minor calls went against Tennessee. Like there was a makeup call or two in there. That lack of interference that was not called on Elijah Molden on that really, really deep shot from Derrick Carr in the second half. That was one of those calls where you're like, that's, good for consistency, at least not calling that there and not calling it on the Chris Moore deep shot. Okay, fine, whatever. You're going to let the guys play downfield. But there was one play that everybody knows what we're about to talk about. There was one play that arguably swung the very outcome of the game. Like it's really not hyperbole to say that. This, of course, was the Derrick Carr incomplete pass fumble. And we've got a clip, JT, comparing this pass or lack thereof, this fumble from Derrick Carr to what we saw at the end of last season from the Titans in Josh Dobbs. They're the same thing. One of these plays was deemed an incomplete pass, and one of them was deemed a fumble. I'll let you guess which one. They're both hurting the Titans. And so the first insane thing that the referees did here was that they did this inexplicable decision by them to blow the play dead upon the defensive return. Kevin Byard scoops up the fumbled ball, has a clear lane to the end zone where he runs and he lays the ball down long after the premature whistle. Referees in the NFL are specifically instructed to let these instances play out. Like that's Ref 101. And why the refs chose to ignore that lesson from Ref 101 is beyond me. I don't know why, but they did it. And it took an almost certain touchdown away from the Titans. There's really no two ways about it. They got jobbed here. They got jobbed. And so that was the first crazy thing, to blow that whistle. But then they doubled down. Like the decision to call the play dead on the return was absurd. But then the decision to double down on their wrongness was even more ridiculous. They then come back and say, not only were we right to blow the play dead, but it was an incomplete pass, guys. It was an incomplete pass. Like it wasn't a fumble. So not even Titans ball. Saints, I think that was a third down. So fourth down, you can kick your field goal. You can tie up the game. I believe that makes it 6-6. But yeah, like that was crazy because it was a by the book, clear example of a fumble. The call was completely inconsistent with what we saw at the end of the season last year for the Titans in this Josh Dobbs pass attempt fumble that lost them the game in week 18 to the Jaguars. And it was also inconsistent with what we saw just a couple minutes later elsewhere in the AFC South in Indianapolis with the Jaguars. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence, he fumbles the ball in this same exact way. It's actually picked up initially by one of his receivers, one of the Jacksonville receivers, who just stands there. And then the veteran savvy move by defensive lineman DeForest Buckner, having the presence of mind to punch the ball out, grab it, run it all the way down the field for a scoop and score that ended up being a touchdown. Exactly what should have happened in the Titans game for the Titans on this play. Like it's absurd that they did this. It can't be explained. It cannot be explained how the officials managed to get this play wrong when given the chance to review it. It's unacceptable. It's something that the Titans fans should take a vocal issue with, in my opinion. Did it solely cost them the game? No way. Absolutely not. But is it a massive error that potentially changed the outcome of the game? Yes, I think it clearly is. And so those are our winners and losers today. And in summary, I want to just mention one more thing before we go. I did this on Twitter, and I think it's the best way of recapping this game. Like, how did the Titans lose? Here's how. Okay, 8 massive mistakes, the 8 biggest mistakes in this game that led to the Titans losing that I have ranked. Number one, a lot of people argue with me on this, but like I think it's objectively, definitively true. The number one biggest mistake that they made that directly impacted them winning or losing was Mike Vrabel kicking that field goal down 4 instead of going for it on 4th and 6th on the 11th yard line, on the 11-yard line, that is. Simply can't make that decision. Analytically unforgivable, logically unsound. There's no two ways about it, in my opinion. Number 2, Ryan Tannehill underthrow of DeAndre Hopkins for his 3rd interception, which was dreadfully underthrown. Number 3 is Ryan Tannehill's underthrow of DeAndre Hopkins for his 1st interception, which was less dreadfully underthrown, but underthrown nonetheless. Number 4 are the refs blowing that car fumble dead and stealing a touchdown from the Titans, then doubling down and calling it an incomplete pass. Crazy. That's number 4. Number 5 is the Tannehill overthrow of Okonkwo on the trick play, which was a walk-in touchdown turned incompletion. Number 6, Ryan Tannehill's poor pass to Tyjae Spears, streaking up the sideline, would-be touchdown turned incompletion. Another instance where 7 points squandered. Number 5 is that deep pass, underthrown deep pass to Chris Moore. I didn't have a huge issue with them taking that shot, JT, on that first drive after the half. My only real quibble with it is Chris Moore the guy you want to try to stretch the field there? Like, is he the one you're wanting to do that? I don't know about that. Like, I'm not sure he's the guy that I'm going to try to create, make him into a vertical threat there. But otherwise, that was the 7th mistake. And then the 8th mistake, Titans coaching staff putting Kristian Fulton back in on that last series, who got promptly cooked to a crisp by Shaheed on that sideline 3rd down, which essentially iced the game. So there it is, your winners and losers. Titans lost 15-16 to the Saints. They host the Chargers in their home opener this upcoming Sunday. The Chargers also coming off of a loss. Never love that when you got a team that's pissed off, and they are in last place, as are the Titans, tied for last in their division. Good and bad news. Bad news is the Titans are facing down going 0-2 if they do not win this game, which is scary. The good news is the Titans, I'm probably going to remind them people of this for the next 2 weeks. The Titans started 0-2 last year, and then by mid-November, they were 7-3. So 0-2, not a death sentence. Doesn't mean it's something you want, but it's not a death sentence. So just relax. Okay, I saw it to maybe the perfect wrap up for today's show, JT. I saw on Twitter right before we recorded. I screenshotted it and tweeted it because it is peak fandom. It is perfect. It is pure, unadulterated fanatic behavior. It is USTA 100% certified beef fandom. It's the way the good Lord intended it. A comment on a Sal from Jersey post, because of course that's where this is going, right? A comment was, wait. This person says, you were just all in on this team all summer long, and now you want to fold after week 1. And Sal's answer, yes. That's all you need to know. That's how it works. That's how fans work. It's week 1. We're going to talk, I think, on Wednesday about a lot of overreaction, week 1 overreaction topics from the Titans game, from the rest of the league. It's my favorite thing to dive into this time of year and try to.
We'll bring back the heat index.
Yeah, the hot heat index. That's really what I'm hoping we can do. It's been a minute. It's time to bring it back. We'll talk through some of the craziest takes from week 1, and there are plenty of them. We'll be back on Wednesday, first thing in the morning, the podcast and the YouTube show. We'll be doing that show live, as always, on Tuesday afternoon. So tune in with us on Tuesday afternoon to be a part of the conversation. Sorry you guys couldn't be a part of the live show today. We recorded it, obviously, putting it up live on Monday. We'll be back live Tuesday for any questions or comments you might have about the Titans. We'd love to talk to you about it then. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.